It's simply few characters are there. Binya is the central character. She's the protagonist, and somehow she comes across a beautiful blue silk umbrella, and she is so fascinated by that umbrella. And like any child, when fascinated by a toy or any other object, would want to own it up, and she's desperately wanting to possess the blue silk umbrella. And this she found amongst the tourists, the picnickers who had come to the hill station for the vacation. uh, Now how would she try to get this umbrella? And the only possibility was that one of the picnickers, one lady who took fascination for the leopard claws pendant which she was wearing. uh, it's a lucky charm. It is believed that these people who inhabit in the hilly regions and in small rural areas, they are very um, particular about protecting themselves from all evil forces, for which they believe that a leopard claw pendant would safeguard them. And Binya possessed one such leopard claw, and this lady among the picnickers, she uh, took fancy for this beautiful leopard claw pendant, and she wanted it. And somehow, with a lot of bargaining and a lot of negotiation takes place, and finally, she's willing to part with the leopard claw pendant for the blue umbrella. So Binya succeeds in getting what she wanted, and it is this umbrella that becomes the focal point of our novella. Now, we look at this book. The title itself says "The Blue Umbrella," and it's the entire story now is moving around this blue umbrella. um, the entire villagers are so attracted towards this blue umbrella that they also start envying Binya. And the most enviable person is Binya here, and the one who envies her the most is Ram Bharosa, who owns a tea shop in that area. And you will find that the story, as it moves forward, it's a struggle to safeguard the umbrella. And eventually, as the story moves forward, there is some kind of transformation that takes place in this little child who is less than 10, who's 10 years old. Probably that's how the writer states, because in those days when the story was written, and especially in small places, the birth of a child is not registered, and therefore they do not have any clear knowledge of when she was born. Even the time or period of the birth is associated with the natural events that take place during that period. So there is a mention in the book, it's mentioned in the book that the mother of Binya says that when Binya was born, there was a lot of snowfall, and the entire area was covered with snow, and that it had reached till the window of the house. And that happened some 10 years ago, and therefore she happens to be 10-year-old. This is how the author nicely plays around and tries to tell us about how and when Binya was born, which is very, very important because it certainly reflects about the way these villagers live. And when we see that eventually something which she cherished, she loved, and she was so possessive about, she was willing to part it. And finally, she gifts this blue umbrella to Ram Bharosa. Now, this is the story. But in between, the moment she procures the umbrella from the picnicker and then till she gifts it to Ram Bharosa, there are a lot of small events, plots, subplots which take place, which all moves around this blue umbrella. And it is here that, for Binya, there's a moral to the story. and that is for Binya, the joy of spreading happiness is more important than owning the umbrella. It's a big message, it's a large message for the masses, that and the message comes from a little girl and not from someone who is elderly, who is more matured. So you will find that the character of Binia transforms towards the end. She becomes more matured, very compassionate and understanding. Now, when we look at Ruskin Bond's characters in this particular novella, The Blue Umbrella, you'll find that something has to be talked about the characters. That is, they are all very simple, but they are all in a complex kind of situation. So simple in the characters are simple in the complexities of life that which surround them. And then there is the complex in their simplicity. Some of them are simple, but then there is something complex about their simplicity. So you'll find this different kinds of characters, mirrored feelings or perspectives of human characters. Not only does Ruskin here talk about the social life, the social fabric of this Garhwal region, but he succeeds in bringing out those characters that are very typical of this region. For instance, Binya is a very Binya is a very naive kind of a girl, and she is the protagonist. Now, if we look at the story, there are only three major characters, as we can say. One is Binya Devi, second is Biju, the third is Ram Bharosa, and there's one more, Rajaram, who comes for a brief period. But the story begins and ends with these three characters who are there throughout. So I did not mention Rajaram as one of the major characters, but he can be considered as one of the minor characters. So we look at the minor characters. So there are hardly, 8 to 9 characters in this entire novella. And they all, the minor characters are there only for one particular scene, they just come and then they go and then they're forgotten. They do not come again. For instance, the pujari of the temple, the schoolmaster's wife, who also wishes that she could possess this umbrella because she thinks that she is educated, she is a second year BA pass, and therefore she should be in possession of this umbrella rather than Binya Devi, who does not even go to school. So Rajaram is, again, you can look at Rajaram as a negative shade, who possesses some negative shade here, who tries to help Ram Bharosa to steal the blue umbrella in exchange for some money which is offered to him. Among the characters, you will find that there is clear divide between the picnickers. They are the only city or people living in the city who come to this little Garhwal region, and they stand for the urban society of this country. There's a beautiful, description of Binya Devi. It's on page number 4. As I said earlier, that I would like to read this, lines from Ruskin Bond in his lucid style. Binya was probably 10. She may have been 9 or even 11. Now there's this uncertainty which the author is trying to project. She couldn't be sure because no one in the village kept birthdays. So even celebrating birthdays and having a party on a birthday is all urban culture. It's not a rural culture. They don't even remember their birthdays. But her mother told her she'd been born during a winter. So the only indication or the only evidence that she's 10-year-old is found here, that she was born during a winter when the snow had come up to the windows, and that was just over 10 years ago, wasn't it? So again, it's not very certain. Now, 2 years later, her father had died, but his passing had made no difference in the way of life, because basically in the rural area, people depend on agriculture. So, even when the father lived, he was cultivating the land, and that's how they had the livelihood. After his death, also, it did not make any difference to them because the land still remained and they cultivated the land. And what is it that they grew in the land? It was potatoes, onions, ginger, beans, mustard, and maize. Not enough to sell in the town, but enough to live on. So, this also talks about the ability to sustain. So, they are not dependent on a city to provide them with their basic, basic kind of food and things like that, food and milk. They are self sufficient, they know how to sustain in this world. Now, other aspects, there is a few description about Binya Devi. She's a mountain girl because she lives very high, she lives in the hilly region, so very tough in that sense, and not a effeminate kind of a weak kind of a girl. But as the story proceeds, you will find the various phases, how she encounters people who are eyeing on her umbrella and how she tries to defend it fiercely. So she's a very bold girl, a sturdy girl. She's got fair skin, as is common about people who live in Himachal Pradesh, the northern region, with pink cheeks, dark eyes, and black hair. That's her description. She wears glass bangles and necklace of glass beads. Now, this necklace has a pendant which is made of leopard glass, which she gives. Now, what is so special about the story? Because the story centers around these two things. Rather, I would say umbrella can also be considered as one of the character, because these are the two characters on which the entire story revolves around. So her fascination, Binya's fascination for the umbrella, and how she parts with her leopard's claw. A leopard claw pendant, prized possession. That's what, it's a prized possession for her. Not only because, not only that's the only piece of jewelry that she possesses, being a girl, but secondly, it is considered to be, something that protects you from the evil forces around you. So it is essential that you can't part with it, but still, this prized possession she parts with. Now, there's the other character, the major character that we discussed, that is Biju. That's her younger, 2 years younger to Biju. She is actually younger to Biju. Biju is the eldest son, and Binya is younger, 2 years younger to Biju. But the point is, you will find Binya to be much more matured than her older brother. What are the activities that she does? Does she go to school? No, she doesn't. It's her brother who's being sent to school, as even before the government has undertaken this Herculean task of educating girls and empowering them. While Ruskin wrote this story, he too was sensitive enough to realize that girls were not being educated, and it is clearly mentioned that she loved reading, so she would pick up her brother's books and read from here and there, but then she was not being sent to school because she was supposed to do the household chores. So she was grazing the cows, fetching water from the spring, and carrying milk to the tea shop. These were some of the tasks or the chores that she was required to do. Now, as a character, she's extremely fearless. How do we know? Because of the various incidents that come across in the novella. The first is when she has an encounter with a very deadly poisonous snake. Anybody else in her place would have been scared to death, but she fiercely defended herself. With the help of the umbrella, she tries to drive the snake and saves her. So she she feels that it's the umbrella that has saved her life. The second incident takes place when Rajaram tries to steal her umbrella, and he does this when Rajaram implores him to get it, offers him money so that Rajaram could steal and get it for Ram Bharosa. And the third time is when there was a heavy wind, when this umbrella floats and she chases and she has to run through the uneven path, and when the umbrella gets stuck in a very precariously dangerous position, she somehow manages to struggle and get it, though a little damage is caused to the umbrella, but the kind of fiercelessness that is exhibited through her actions is something worth notice. We'll also find that Binya is very naive, because when the picnickers offered to part with the umbrella, she was asked to give her leopard claw, which was very, very important for her safety, for her for safeguarding herself from the evil forces. But she falls prey to that kind of a demand. That itself shows how naive she is. She's very the gullibility and the ingenuousness of Binya's character is exhibited every time in the story, especially when she tries to pick up those porcupine feathers, and at that time also she doesn't realize that somebody was chasing her. That was Rajaram, who tries to steal. She had just left it there, and she was so innocent that thinking that nobody would steal her umbrella, but it is not so. And you will also find the ingenuousness, the kind of the compassion that she had for Ram Bharosa, who was evil-minded, wicked, and he tried to take hold of the umbrella